What's up, my people? Welcome to Fellowship Bible Church's Sermon Spotlight, where we are coming at you each and every week with a fresh sermon to debrief and new talking points to discuss in an effort to send biblical truth into your week by fellowshipping together. And what better way to do that than by the power of conversation? I'm Caleb Pearson. To my right, Ashton Burzio. Ashton, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, man. Doing all right.
Oh, good. Are you happy to be here?
Dude, I'm ready to get going.
It feels so good. So it's interesting because we don't necessarily know who's going to ever hear this.
Yeah.
This is episode 0 before we officially launch Sermon Spotlight. And so today, Ashton, what I just kind of wanted to do was not only run through the tech specs and kind of test out our setup here in the booth, but I felt like this would be a good opportunity for you and I to introduce ourselves to our congregation or whoever might be listening to this, and talk about why we have felt called to do this. And so by the time we get moving, you and I can both understand why we're here and how we can kind of work together in that way. And so I wanted to just kind of send it to you right away to introduce yourself and kind of explain your passion for this.
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Ashton. I've been a part of Fellowship Bible Church for the last, since birth.
Yep.
We got a couple of birthers here, lifers. My parents started coming before they had me back in '89, and spent my whole childhood here at Fellowship going through ministries here, and Mike Lukens was my youth pastor. John Avery was my youth pastor. John Avery's now my father-in-law. So I'm all in on Fellowship right now. So I when I graduated high school, went to George Mason, graduated with a degree in communications, media production and criticism, and I've been a part of FPC staff for the last seven years, doing a bunch of different stuff, media, communications, kind of all over the board.
Yeah.
Also one of the worship leaders at Fellowship, and really love doing that.
That's good. Man, I love that we can say we were born into this church.
I know.
How long have you been coming here? How long have I not been coming here?
Right.
Okay, because this is all I know and all I love. Yeah, so I've been in Winchester my whole life. Graduated from JMU a couple Mays ago, studying biology, but got so plugged into college ministry, Ashton, to where I really felt like the Lord was calling me to that. Fellowship opened up a mentorship program that I kind of helped pioneer and do a 9-month session with them, and that included shadowing pastors and getting exposed to all the different areas of ministry, which was good because it had been a few years since I had been here.
Right.
And so following that, by the grace of God, they hired me on, and so I'm director of student ministries now, working with Pastor Dennis with the youth group. But I have loved podcasting, man. I've done it before.
Yep.
Pursued the hobby and interest with a buddy of mine specifically, and so coming on staff, and it was even you and I in Africa right away, we were kind of talking about how awesome would it be for the church to do this. And so the hope here is that this is going to be a weekly spot for you to listen to a short-term podcast where we can debrief the sermon each and every week, and not only shed light on the sermon and what was talked about within it, but also use its application to pivot towards our church life, and what that can look like. And so I wanted to kind of intro our time today, Ashton, by just addressing the question of what are our hopes in regards to Sermon Spotlight's reach and teach.
Yeah, for sure.
And what I mean by that is who do we want to listen to this, and what do we want them to take away from that? I mean, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I love this medium. The ability to, throughout the week, tap into just a plethora of content, and not just spiritual, but just some really creative things right in our pockets. And the thing about podcasting is, the platform is so huge. You might think that radio is dying, but podcasts kind of came in and swooped under the radar and started dominating that market. And in a lot of ways, the church has really been absent from this platform. Churches will post their sermons there for sure that you can subscribe to. But as far as really getting truth into people's weeks, the church has really been absent from that. And it's been one of my desires to keep the importance, elevate the importance of the Saturday night gatherings of our weekend worship. Those are so important, and they will always be important because it's something that God values and has called us to gather on a regular basis and be in community. But that's only an hour right. 15 of our week.
Right.
And there's 166 other hours in our week where we need to be invested in the Word, invested into each other's lives. And this is just one of these ways that we can start getting truth and community and discussion into our weeks that doesn't just happen on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, if you've ever accidentally come across somebody and gotten into a conversation about church, that's a fruitful time.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And to hear somebody else's take on a sermon can help you either, at the very least, understand them,
Right.
but at the very most, understand more about your God and about what He wants from you. And I mean, community groups have this model, and you know, a lot of people will just kind of talk about the sermon and the weekend. And so we wanted to create an intentional time to capitalize on that. And so my hope is that our congregation can, one, be made aware of this podcast, and that's what's so good about the medium and about the different ways we can share it, so that they can get plugged in. I mean, we'll address this kind of a little bit later on today, but I want them to be a part of this podcast. I want them to feel like they are a part of it if they want to be.
Right. Yeah. This is really, I mean, it's a conversation between you and I, but really it's a conversation between us and everyone else.
Is.
And the hope is that this will spark conversation, that people will be willing to reach out and ask questions and make suggestions and really be a part of this. But
yeah. And some of the success I found in my first run at podcasting was giving the audience and the listener an opportunity to email in or chat or be a part of the conversation, so that I was a mouthpiece for them. Right. They don't have a sound booth and tech equipment, but they can have a voice all the same. And so the idea there is that you and I can create that place. And so what we hope to do, what we will be doing, is inviting the teaching pastor on each and every Tuesday. And so they'll preach on Sunday. We'll take a couple days and give them an opportunity to expand on something they felt like they didn't have time to, or for us to address them with any questions. But also, if neither of those things happens, then it's a more informal, off-the-clock relationship with a pastor, which you and I get because we work with them, but so many people don't get. And so a greater appreciation for them.
They're actually pretty funny.
Yeah, no, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
They're pretty cool.
Against all odds, they're actually nice to be around. Right. So we want to break down that barrier. And so that's kind of the hope. And so to pivot kind of almost along those lines, but more specifically, what are some stretch goals for the Life of Sermon Spotlight, Ashton? And I wrote here in our notes, dream with me. Like what would you love to see happen as we embark on this journey? Do you have any thoughts to that? I can add some as well.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to see this expand into other ministries taking the opportunity to have conversations, to bring truth. Really, I mean, it's the same reasoning for this, to send truth into our weeks, things that we can tap into, you know, and maybe things that aren't necessarily an hour-long expository lesson on, and maybe that will happen, and that's great when it does happen. But there is also value to these kind of just shorter, as you're driving to work, 15, 30 minutes, that you can tap in and be encouraged and think about things that are good and holy and right. And we just have such value in this church of teachers and ministries that to limit it to a Sunday morning or a Saturday night is we're really losing something there. So I'd love to see, you know, we have some ideas, some plans for a global missions podcast, you know, bringing Scott and Jim, our missions pastors, on to talk about trips that they've gone on, to talk about stories that they're hearing from around the world, real informal, just like this, you know, getting those stories out and heard. I'd love to see our counseling ministry come on and have conversations about really relevant issues that people are struggling with anxieties and depression and loneliness and, you know, everything that we go through in this life, but with a biblical perspective and in a conversational, low-key tone that is really approachable. Yeah,
I think that's great. And I think one of the two main things that you and I talked about were how long is this podcast going to be? And why are we calling it Sermon Spotlight? And so I wanted to flesh that out a little bit. And if I say anything that you don't agree with, just cut me off and yell at me, whatever.
Don't worry.
We don't really care how long it goes.
Yeah.
We want it to be natural. If we have a guest on and a pastor would like to get into it, by all means, get into it. I want them to feel just as comfortable as us. And even when we pitched it to them, we said, there is no strict recipe or formula you have to fit into. We're simply talking. We are drinking coffee, sitting around, talking. And then the second thing is, okay, well, if we're seeking to send biblical truth into your week by fellowshipping together, what exactly does that mean? And calling it Sermon Spotlight, and I touched on this a little bit at the beginning, and even you kind of doubled down on it just then. It's not going to be an exposition of anything. We're not trying to read you the Bible. We're trying to show you that it can come to life and the way we interact with each other. And so our hope is that you and I can not only just gain a rapport together and be able to bounce thoughts off each other, but our listeners and our viewers can do that as well.
Yeah.
We'll be doing video on YouTube. The audio will go out to people. And in a culture of, I think, tremendous busyness, podcasting is there. No matter how busy people get, I think they find a time to listen to what they want to listen to.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it can happen while you're doing other things.
Yeah.
And so that's our idea. That's what I hope kind of happens. As far as any stretch goals I might have, man, I would love to get to the point where if pastors can't come on, we see who in the congregation can, or give them an opportunity to email in, or engage you and I to where our baseline is going to be you and me debriefing a Sunday or whatever the church happened to do that weekend.
Right.
So if we had an event, we can break it down with you being communications and me being youth. I think we cover a broad variety of what could be going on.
Right.
But then also they can offer thoughts and be like, would you guys elaborate on this point? And we do it.
Yeah.
When I first kind of pitched to you an idea for Sermon Spotlight, I said, I want to create a recipe so that we can destroy it with freedom. Like we could podcast together and we can do what we want. And so it's interesting because if anybody, as far as a listener is concerned, is coming across episode 0, they're 2 to 3 weeks into the future.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, they're just getting a little bit of me and you, and we have nothing specific to debrief right now.
Right.
But hopefully they can understand you and me a little more.
Yeah.
And so that they choose to listen to us because they feel that. I mean, so many podcasts you listen to because it's great, but you have no personal connection with the person speaking. But this is the congregation come to life.
Right. And this is for fellowship. This
exactly.
is for you, the congregation.
Yeah.
We're not looking to expand outside the walls for this particular channel. This is for the life of the church in Winchester, Virginia. And if you're someone who listens to the sermons online as we post them on Sunday afternoons or Mondays, you're welcome to be a part of this and listen and glean from this as well. But this particular channel, the Sermon Spotlight, is focused on our weekend worship services and really bringing that to life.
And hopefully it's somewhat of a guinea pig for the future of podcasting here too.
Yeah.
I mean, we have this booth now, we have this setup now. No matter what podcast you do or what your goal or vision is, you can plug and play with the technology and with the system and with the medium as well. So right now, Ashton and I have just been working on the channels, a lot of back end stuff. We'll be doing kind of what I call a full court press here soon, where we spread it out to everyone. And so our hopes right now are to do episode 1 next week together and actually debrief the sermon a little bit and talk about the week. There'll be something special going on at church that we can break down there. But then beginning with episode 2, the hope will be to invite pastors on and have a third chair here, that mysterious third chair.
Oh, yeah.
And I almost wonder if or do you think any pastor is just always going to deny us or be like, I want nothing to do with it?
Oh yeah, probably.
I hope at least, basically, here's a stretch goal. How many different pastors can we get on this podcast within the first few months? Like that would be so fun to try. Some of them will be all about it. Some of them, I feel like we'd have to bait them in here with sweets or treats or something to get them to sit down. But yeah, it's going to be super fun. Anything else you wanna throw out there or mention in episode 0? I'm pretty much out of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, awesome. Well, the fact of the matter, Ashton, is that sermons are not meant to take an hour, but rather transform a lifetime. Until next week, much love and God bless.